Fire Media Network is back for another week. Took last week off to let the world settle down a tiny bit, if it was at all possible, to let the news out there in the world that needed to be heard properly instead of trying to promote a podcast. But we're back this week in a timely fashion with an author who has written two very substantial and important books to humans, with another one on the way. I've got Faust Ruggiero here hanging out with me, author of the Fix Yourself and the Fix Your Anxiety Handbooks. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be with you.
I love speaking to authors because I am fascinated with people that can write books. That commitment to sitting down, putting pen to paper or pencil to paper or whatever process it took for you to get there. I respect the process, and wow, good for you. So you got two of them with one on the way. So yeah, I love speaking to you guys. It's great. It's great. Um, we're going to dive into a few things today. You've got some very important novels under your belt. The world is kind of spinning a little bit off its axes. So I do want to cover off a few things today based on some of the things that you've written, and maybe some advice for our listeners and watchers today. But before we get rolling through that, why don't you tell everybody in this fine world, what do you do?
Well, Brendan, I've been a psychologist in private practice for about 35 years, but it's over 40 years in my career. And, I'm just the guy that wants to fix things, wants, to help people understand who they are, the powers that they have, and just let's put some quality into life if we can.
Psychologist first, author second.
Absolutely.
That's right. But it making it easier to write the books. You have got two under your belt, as we discussed. So we'll get into it. The Fix Yourself Handbook was the first one, using the process way of life to transform. And the second book that you put out after that is the Fix Your Anxiety Handbook. And we'll dive into the next one that's coming out. They're both very important topics right now, considering what's happening, but just not just around the world, but just people coming out of COVID and various things. There's definitely anxiety, and there's people that need to do a bit of an audit on themselves as well, and maybe the people that are in their lives. So writing those books, um, is this something like you sit down to decide to write the book? Are you constantly writing as you're going through life to write the next book? Like how do you how do you balance between the two of being of writing and also being a psychologist at the same time?
If I didn't have a career that spanned so long, I would probably be doing that. But what happens is when you counsel as long as I have, you amass so much information that when it comes time to write, I just decide on the topic that I want to write. I begin doing the basic research that I'm going to do. I write an outline for the book, so it's chapter by chapter. I know exactly what I want to say. Then I begin writing, and for me, writing is dictating. I think it's a lot more accurate for me, and then it just takes off. The first book took a longer time. I was just learning what to do. The second book I wrote in about I'm thinking 8-9 weeks, and this last book is finished. That was done in about 6. So it's the knowledge is there. It's just now putting it into a format that people can understand.
It must be a huge undertaking to sit down and write a book. I've got a friend who designs and draws and does comic books for a living, and that's always like a big like accomplishment when that comes out because there's so much work that goes into it. I've had other friends write books. It just seems like a massive undertaking, but it must feel extremely rewarding when it comes out, and then the feedback that you get from something like this, especially when you're helping people like this for a living. It must feel incredible to take the knowledge that you've accumulated over the years and put it in, pen to paper, and then have it come out and people buy it.
It is when you look at it in the bigger picture. However, I'm not one to look at the accomplishment, if you will. It's out, they're reading it, and what's interesting. The first book I wrote in 3-year process, and I get my author's copy in the mail. I picked it up and felt nothing. I thought I was going to say, "Oh my God," and I realized that it's real for me. It's about the process of doing it. That's always for me. Once it's done, it's in the past. It's over.
Hmm.
And then you promote it, you talk to people about it, you help them get to the point where there's a little bit more understanding about what you wrote. But then it's on to the next one. So I did that one, and obviously anxiety is taking over the world, so it made sense to go there. The next book is about depression,
Hmm.
obvious an obvious jump, and then there's this seven, 8 books planned. So it'll just go as one is being published. I'm starting the next one. It's just, you know,
Did they approach you about like the publisher approach you about putting it out, or was it something that you had the idea and you had to go find people to put it out?
it was my idea, and it's interesting that you asked that. You write the book, and then okay, now it's time to try to get an agent. So I did that, and I had two that were very willing to work with me. But what I was finding is that now it was becoming their vision, not mine.
Mm.
So I actually went and decided to, stop the process and self-published. And that's what we're doing. I have a team we put together. It's a couple agents work with us, but there's a copywriter and there's a publicist and a publisher involved. And we just now have the vision. I write it. Everyone gets involved. It stays on track, and we put it out.
How easy is that process to actually physically publish it? Because I would imagine the publishers that you would go to would have a vision like, hey, we're going to put out 500 books or we're going to put out 1,000. In music industry, you have to decide how many records back in the day, how many CDs you were making, or how many shirts you're going to sell based on not going in too far in debt. If you're self-publishing this book, then you must have to sit back and kind of look at your social media, look at the people in your life, and look at that market, which is obviously massive. So is it like you've done two, you've got more on the way. It's clearly worth it to you to do it, but the process must not be that easy.
If you focus on that big process, it gets overwhelming. I just go day to day in what I'm doing, what I'm going to write about today, what I'm going to edit today. And when you do that, you're so focused, all your energy is in what you're doing, that the project just takes care of itself at that point. We have everyone involved. I write it, I edit it. I'll do 3 or 4 edits myself. Then it goes to the copy editor. She has that book, the third book now. It'll come back to me. I'll do some editing again. She'll get it again, and then when we're satisfied with it, then the publisher gets it, and that's nothing more than doing the illustrations and setting up the format,
Sure.
uh, and he does that, and then when we're ready, I say, "Yep, sounds good." Stamp of approval. He uploads it to Amazon and whoever else, and there we go. It's not when you understand it, it's not that big monster. But I always tell everyone before you start writing a book, learn about the publishing industry first.
Mm. I would say that's that like if it's anything like in the music industry as far as the publishing side goes and trying to share it out and get it out, it must be even more competitive. I would think.
It can be. I was intelligent enough to surround myself with good people. So when I said, "What do I do now?" They said, "Next step, do this." I remember when the first book came back from the copy editor the first time, and it comes back in Microsoft Word, and on the right side are all the either corrections or suggestions. And I looked at it and I said, "Oh my God, there must be a thousand here."
Yeah.
And at that point, that's when I said, "Okay, I got two options. I can, just be beside myself on this and say, 'Oh man, I don't like this,' or she's going to be my best friend from this point on." So I went the second route, have no resistance. It comes back, and I just, "Oh, okay." And I said, "I wrote the darn book. I'm sure I can do some of the corrections." And the corrections might be, you said this once, or you said it a little differently here. Can we merge these two? This is a little long-winded. That basic things that that they're trained to do. And when you do that, it's just, you know, the whole process, you know what's going to happen, and then you just plug in and go. That's
You
all.
actually physically sit down and writing with pen and paper, or are you actually sitting down in front of a computer and doing it?
I am sitting down with the computer.
Yeah.
We use Microsoft Word.
Yeah.
I have a microphone and I dictate.
Okay.
So this way, as I'm doing this, I, I'm your typical average typer. You know, didn't have to learn that. Had
Sure.
started to realize it when I said, okay, I'm going to write books, and I said, oh my god, you know, carpal tunnel, here we come. And then someone said, well, why don't you dictate? I said, well, I was going to get all these programs to do it. And they said, it's right in Word. You can dictate right in there. So I just dictate.
That's amazing.
And then, you know, also I'll dictate maybe 4 or 5 pages a day, and then I'll edit them. I'll go right back and edit it at the end of the day. Next day, we pick up from there. I'll quickly read what I did and go to the next chapter and go
It's
from there.
scary where AI has come probably since you've written those books, and now there's going to be all these tools. Where like, well, you should think about this because it'll make your life easier about that. But you want it to be authentic. So what a
Exactly.
time! What a time to be a creator right now. It's crazy. In your first book, you talk. It's titled "The Fix Yourself Handbook." So can you walk me through a very simple question for you? But I'm sure you cover off a great thing, a great deal of this subject. But how can people fix themselves?
You know, when I started to think about which book I wanted to write first, that was the first one, and it got about 36 chapters, and I went through all different kinds of things that plague people, honesty and emotional health, and um, you know, anger and fear and all those things. And what I wanted to do was to put an initial text that had all these various problems. Publishers did not like that. They wanted me to stay on to one or two topics. That's what people tend to do. But we stuck with, we kind of stuck to our guns, and put that book out. And the answer to your question is, how do you fix yourself? You get honest about it, and you decide this is what is not working, and that's the first step. I call it brutal honesty. You've got to be able to look at yourself and say, I'm going to hold myself accountable. I'm going to be honest. I know these things have to change. I'm going to stop blaming other people and other events for what's not working for me. I am going to go inside me, so to speak, and I'm going to define these things, and I'm going to you know, take it on and work the processes I have to work to make those changes.
Almost like a life audit. I felt like I was in a situation back in the mid 2000s, and I had moved across the country and wasn't feeling amazing about myself just in general, and had kind of made a big life change. But then also it came with a life audit. And I
Mhm.
found that when I started with that audit of like, where am I? Who am I? Who's in my life? Who's providing value?
Right.
Am I providing value to them? And it was this just whole audit on myself that I had to do, which felt scary, but also quite amazing to do it at that time. So I call it the life audit, but do you have a definition for that?
And you can call it that. You know, what I call it is looking inside to the strengths you have. Everything we need is already inside us. We have to go and access that. And what you just said is what I talk about often. We've got to stop focusing outside of ourselves. You know, we're trying to keep up with this one. You and I were talking about, you know, being in the middle, so to speak, not being in the left or right. You know, people are trying to define where they're supposed to fit in, and that is impossible. If you're going to do this, you're right. It's an audit. It is an intense and in-depth review of self to say what works, what doesn't work. The first thing you're going to do is purge. I tell this to people all the time. You're not going to pull your car into the packed garage until you empty the garage.
Mhm.
So you need to empty yourself of all the negativity, all the stuff that's not working for you.
Which is a scary. It's just scary for a lot of people. They have to look in the mirror and face the reality that maybe these people around them aren't their friends. You know, it's so easy to accumulate fake friends or just weekend friends or something that you prop up as your friends. But then ultimately, at the end of the day, I think I heard a saying one time with like, we really only have 5 people in our life that we can rely on when it's all said and done. Everyone else is just kind of floating around in the system. And I think that people get scared at this idea that to move forward, they have to remove.
And it's people, places, and things. I remember going way back, back in the '80s. I was hired to work in a prison, and the job was drug and alcohol counselor. And I got certified in addiction, and I'm not recovering. I don't drink. I don't have much of a problem with anything like that. But I learned the 12-step program, and they talk a lot, as you know, of people, places, and things, and you've got to determine what works. Most of the people are not going to work for you, and that's a difficult concept to embrace. But someone comes in the office and says, "I only have 3 friends," and I said, "That's great. You only need
Mhm.
3. The rest are acquaintances. Enjoy them. Don't take anything too serious about them. Have your little inner circle. That's enough." And then we start a purging process. Let's get everything out there that doesn't work. All the people that don't work, the things you're doing, the places you're going, all that stuff that you're trying to fit in. I always use the analogy that when I was a kid, my father used to talk about um, his friends that drank and they were acquiring a taste for scotch. And I said, "Well, geez, Dad, if you don't like it, why would you want to acquire it?" And
Mhm.
I'd say that with friends. You're What are you doing? Are you trying to put these people in your life? If there's that much effort, they don't belong there.
Good point. I mean, and it's how we want to spend our time, right? We only have a limited amount of time. I'm a massive proponent of time, and it's like the only commodity in life we don't get back. So, even our health can be fixed to some extent by following some of these tools that you're presenting mentally, anyways. But our time we don't get back. So, how do we want to spend that time? Is a big, big thing for me. So that being said, how did you do it then? We'll move on to did the books came together based on your experience, but walk me through a little bit of that history for you. You said you were in a prison, but and reading your bio, obviously it's taken many, many different forms from addiction counselor to alcohol and then just other things. So how did you get to this space where you're at right now?
A lot of that was by design. Um, I knew, maybe I figured about 10 years or so after graduate school, I wanted to go into private practice. But before I got there, I wanted to have enough reference points so that I had things to draw on. Working in a prison was one. I worked with deaf kids. I worked in clinics, uh, you know, um, uh, corporate settings, all that kind of thing. I wanted that all to be in place so that when someone came into the office, I had things to draw on. So I've kept it as diversified as possible. So now when it came time to write books, there was a load, of reference points, a lot of things to draw on. So, when I talk to people and they'll ask a question, I can usually go to the answer very quickly because there's enough experience in all these different places. So that really set me up, not only to counsel but to write. I don't get writer's block. I don't have to overthink what I'm doing. It's right in front of me.
What portion of psychology do you enjoy the most? You've done through addiction, maybe you worked with deaf children, you work with various things. Helping people is at your core, but where is that spot for you that you feel most comfortable in this space?
It's just what we call clinical psychology. It's just, uh, you know, I I'm one of those people that loves people and loves to be with people. So every time I meet a new person, it's a whole new gift. It's like Christmas all over again. I get to go in and learn about someone. I get to meet them and help them peel off layers of their lives and make some changes. And so for me, that part of psychology is the counseling. It's the listening to people. It's the getting in there and really, really getting close with them and establishing that trust relationship, and then watching them kind of unfold, watch their lives unfold step by step, and watch them embrace those changes and understand that with all of those changes, they're becoming stronger and stronger, and they're realizing it, and then they start to like the journey they're involved in.
Let me ask you this then: if can you turn it off? And
Quickly,
by you
yes.
can quickly turn it off. So if you're sitting at a group of people over a dinner and maybe you know everybody, but maybe there's just somebody there talking out of their ass like a lot of people do. They, they're like, oh, and this happened and this, and they're kind of giving you the water cooler version of something where they all of a sudden, like the rest of the world, all of a sudden became an expert on COVID or vaccines or whatever. Like I'm just saying that knowing what you know and what you've learned about people, is it difficult for you to sit at that table, or do you have to turn it back on to correct that person? How do you turn that hamster
I
off?
don't correct them. It's funny that you asked that. My wife and I have a little, not a rule, but this is the way we uh, guide our lives, if you will. We don't talk in conclusions, and that's what's happened in this nation and in the world. People will say, "Oh, that's that way because," and they'll give you this. And I always say, I talk about the three questions deep. If you really want to trip them up, I don't try to change your mind. I just ask questions because really it's all about information. If I give you all the information, not the conclusion, you'll come to your own conclusion, and that's fine. But what we don't do is we don't allow each other to express information. Once the topic comes up, the authorities just seem to come out of the woodwork. So
Mhm.
I just ask a few questions and then I just pull back. And then usually, if they know what they're talking about, they'll provide more information. More often than not, the conversation stops and they will quickly divert and go on to something else.
I mean, it's going to lead to this question I'm desperately need an answer for and help with, and I think the rest of the world needs help with, which revolves around living in the middle. But do you feel then putting those own tools in place for you to prevent yourself from getting fully immersed in that conversation, when you either a ask those questions or walk away from that situation, say either I can't get involved, or at minimum I feel rewarded after like how I handled that? Do you still get that boost like yourself of saying that you've put your tools in place to help you through that situation of that dinner table that you don't want to be at anymore?
It used to be that way. After so many years of doing it, however, it's like you walk into a situation and you already know if it's going to start, you know what to do.
Right.
So as it's going to unfold, I'm already there. I'll quickly, like the radar, if you will, goes out, and I'll say, okay, that's one I don't think I want to get involved in. Or even if I do, I'm not going to change any minds. And even if I give them information, and I mean, they could bring something up, something about counseling, something about anatomy, or things I've studied, and I'll say, well, you know what? This is how that works. They'll correct me and say, no, no. So I already know. I'm comfortable with them either being part of the conversation and growing, or remaining stagnant and stuck in their mess. If that's what they want, I'm comfortable. It's them that they're doing that. I'm not. I don't take any responsibility for changing their mind or helping them to think better unless they want to do that. It's just like someone comes in the office for counseling. If they come in for counseling and I give them, hey, we work through this, and hey, try these things now, and they don't do it, I don't say, oh my God, what am I doing wrong? I say, well, I guess they didn't want to.
Right.
I can only counsel you as far as you're willing to go. In that conversation, I can only converse with you as far as we're willing to go. If we're both willing to put some information out there, the eventual conclusion will arise based on our information. Or we'll say we're not really sure about the conclusion, but we had a nice conversation that felt good. If it's not going to be that, I don't take responsibility for someone else's decisions.
Conversations right now can be a split, like a splitter of that table. It can take a dinner party and take it south pretty fast. I'm assuming that you would go into any of these scenarios knowing maybe who's going to be there. Maybe you get invited to something. We all have certain friends now. Our friend groups are smaller, but in your scenario with your colleagues and some of these people that are around, I'm sure you get invited to various different things with all sorts of people. And I've had to kind of adapt to the new scientists of the world that learned everything off of Facebook, or ironic or weird articles that they just find floating in space. I understand people's needs for knowledge and trying to go and inform themselves and educate themselves on certain things. I do lean towards various scientific approaches, though, which is, hey, if it's already been proven, why are we still trying to prove it? So I guess I'm having a bit of an issue in the middle. Not me personally. I love living in the middle. I call it alt middle, which is basically I don't want to go all the way left or all the way right, which I find a lot of people are doing right now. You almost have to feel like you have to pick a side. But every week there seems to be a new subject that people can fight about. I've never felt the world off its axes like this in my whole life. I'm 48. I've there's been some moments,
Mhm.
but after 2019, I felt like the world was off its axis a bit, and then of course we were introduced to the pandemic, and then we had a whole bunch of things that happened out of that. And I find myself living in the middle because I think that everyone got a little bit too far right and left, and I'm having a hard time navigating it now because let's just say the tensions in the Middle East. I was just in the Middle East. I've done tons of time in Saudi Arabia, Tel Aviv, all these places, and everyone was wonderful to me and great. But then obviously there's a lot of things happening and a lot of history in those markets. And then after, I try not to timestamp these interviews, but let's just say that, given everything that's going on in Israel and some of these other things that are happening, it is now you're starting to see people online, but maybe before where they weren't posting about the vaccine or where they stood. Now it's like either pro-Israel or pro-Palestine, or if you like one or the other, then you're this or you're that. There's so many things. So I know that's a bit of a spiel by me, and I'm trying to wrangle it in, but I would love to get your advice on how to live in the middle and come out of it mentally feeling okay.
Yeah. You know, as we talked before, I live in the middle too. But years ago, middle meant kind of you're independent, you're non-committal, that type of thing. It's not that. All the roles have changed. When I was in college, to be a liberal mind meant we entertained anything. If you brought it up, we were willing to listen. We were liberal. Our minds were liberal. Today, liberal aligns way left, unfortunately, and then we have way right. And people will actually ask you where you are today before they get to know you. A lot of labeling going on. Um, so it really, for me, was the decision to redefine what my middle was, and my middle for me is what we said before. My middle is information. That's what my middle is. The people on each end are not good. The reason they go to the end is they need a conclusion, but
Hmm.
they're not good or not patient enough or not willing to uh, uh, look for honest information. They're looking to substantiate conclusions. So I let them do that. What I find is that um, when I'm in the middle, they're one. I I have them very concerned because they don't know where I am. If they bring something up, I don't give them
Hmm.
a conclusion. As I'm doing that and I'm letting them fight it out, whatever, and I ask my questions, it puts them in a position to be off balance. Believe it or not, they will attempt to come more toward the middle because since I'm not on either side, I'm not seen as a threat.
I have had some conversations. I mean, I'm around. tons of people all the time when I travel, and there's up to 100 people traveling with me at one point on tour. So you're going to get all sides. That's been happening for years. So sure, there used to be a jokey part about it. It's like, oh, you're this Republican and you believe in this and da 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 da. Like people used to joke about things. I would say even in the '90s. Obviously, the world changed after 2001, but I really feel up until at least 2001, it was a bit more jokey about where you stood, whether you were liberal, more liberals or conservatives, kind of hanging out and playing in the sandbox together. And now it just seems very, very much right now it's split like crazy. And why, like you touched on people needing conclusion. um so why do people need conclusion then, on both sides, on left and right? Why is it so difficult to be in the middle?
Because they're not secure in who they are. They need to know who they're going to identify with, who is going to have their back, if you will, where their identity is going to be. So people who, conclusion people, if you will, they need to know where they're going to belong. And I'm seeing that. People come in the office and they'll, online dating is the thing that carries all the romantic world today. And they'll say, people will ask questions like, well, before I even think about going out with you, do you like Trump? And I'd say, that's the question. Yeah. And then the person will say, I don't know what to say because I don't know which side they were on. And I usually tell them, if they ask that question, you don't want to be with them. But we need to identify with someone. There is perceived safety there. There is identity and a sense of belonging.
Even if the like theoretically it's absolutely insane. Like, is there a
Yeah.
point where
That,
people go, is there people, and is there a point where people kind of look at that answer, what you just said, where it's like, well, no matter what, like I've heard people in America that no matter what happens, I can't vote for Biden because I'm a conservative. So I just can't, out of principle, whether I like Trump or not. Or the other way, saying I can't vote for Trump because I'm a liberal at heart, and they don't give me any more options, which I do believe is a thing down there, which is tough. Up here we're about 6 months behind you guys as far as if it it's not we're behind you, but it's not too far off. And my travels around the world, it's funny when you talk to people and they really don't care what's happening over here. It's only everyone over here that thinks everyone else around the world cares about
right.
what's happening here, and it really splits it. It really splits the atom. And I just find it interesting that people just can't seem to get back to this middle, and it's kind of becoming frustrating for me. It must be
If,
frustrating for you.
if you feel good about yourself, you're confident, you're honest with it, which is such a big key. Honest with yourself. You don't need left or right. Where you are, you don't even define it as middle. That's another thing I don't do. I don't think about in or out of the box. I just think about how I think. So I guess that's why I don't have time. I don't have a problem navigating all this. It's all about information. It's all about getting the right information to and essentially formulate a plan and execute a plan that makes sense. And I'm confident. I'm comfortable. If they don't like what I had to say, I'm okay with that. Doesn't matter.
So
Um,
ultimately, it's being comfortable with yourself
Bottom
on
line,
wherever you are, left,
wait,
right, middle, as long as
yeah.
you're comfortable with yourself.
But what I define as the middle, as you and I were talking about it, is me. It's me being comfortable with me. That's all. And if I am, I might stay in the middle, or I might say, well, no, you know, I really back that conservative approach on this one, or that liberal approach on this one. It doesn't matter. I don't does I can sway if I need to. I can go where I want to go because that may be where the information took me. But I'm very comfortable. So my middle is me. I don't think I don't need to be pigeonholed in either place. the last thing I want to say is, well, geez, elections coming up, and boy, I'm left or I'm right, and I can't vote there because I'm supposed to be over here, and well, and the candidates are talking. I say, well, do you support abortion? Well, I don't know if I can vote for you, or what's your thing on diversity, right? You know, to run a country, there are 1,000 different things we have
Yeah.
to know, and I'm going to vote on one, and I'm watching them all do that. That's where conclusion people go.
Mm,
I'm
good point.
comfortable with me. I am the middle, and that's where we all should be, in the middle.
I've always been like, as long as my streets are, my roads are fixed up the street. I think people all of a sudden get confused on federal, up here, federal versus provincial, federal versus state, and I think there needs to be like a show featuring both people from right, left, and middle, quote unquote, all sitting around here going, no, Arkansas, that's a state issue. It's not a America issue, or Canada. It's like that's a Ontario issue. That's not a. And I think people go, oh, I didn't know that. And I think let's get that part out of the way first, and defining like what is actually a federal problem versus a state or provincial problem, which I think confuses the shit out of a lot of people. So
It does, because you know what? It's interesting that we're talking about this. When I wrote the books, my chapters are 5, 6 pages long, as you know.
Mhm.
I did that because people don't have an attention span to read a 30-page chapter and then extrapolate the information and come to conclusions. So what's happened in our society, you talk about that axis thing we're talking about, it's because we're not information seekers anymore. We're conclusion seekers. We go on Facebook and read a headline and a little blur under that, and then we talk to our friend and they say, "Did you hear this is what's happening now?" And there are times I've seen the headline and I say, "Really? What did you think about this part of it?" And they go, "Oh, I didn't see that part." I said it was right down in the article if you would have read it.
I love that quote. We're not info seekers. We're
We're not.
conclusion seekers.
We're
I think, well, I'm an info seeker,
So am I. And you know what?
but it's funny.
Being an information seeker, you constantly feed your brain,
Yeah.
and your brain feels that nurturance. It feels that growth. And that's just a wonderful feeling. Conclusion people are always fighting. So they're dealing with negative energy. The information provides positive energy. And there's time management, that's great, but there's energy management. Where am I putting my energy
Hmm.
every day? Am I going to put it into fighting this one off and having this argument, or am I going to put it into a positive way to gain information, feed my brain, and have all those answers in not that I even have to use them, but it's always the process of information acquisition. That's what it's all about. It feels good.
Faust Ruggiero here with me today, author of 2 books so far. That's self-published. Amazing. I'm so jealous that you have the ability to do this. I'd love to write one day, but it's a long journey. The Fix Yourself Handbook was the first one. The Fix Your Anxiety Handbook is the latest one, and you've got a brand new one coming out. So let's move on to what will you do next, sir? What's the plan here? What's the next book?
By the end of the year, we hope to have the Fix Your Depression Handbook published, and that'll conclude this initial part of the series. Once that gets published, I'm thinking December somewhere. Then I'll start the fourth book, and that one's gonna be one of those ones that initiates the controversy. It's the Fix Your Discrimination Handbook. And that's where I'm going to attack so much of these conclusions and not doing information the way we need to. So that one will come out sometime next year.
You said you have a plan for 9 versions, 9
Yeah.
different things.
Mhm.
What kind of subjects are you looking to do?
Relationships, we're going to do anger, fear. Um, we might do something with children. Um, so I think we have 7 defined, and it can go to 9. We'll see how things pan out.
Do they all tie in together? So I wanted to talk a little bit. I did have a question for you about addiction and sort of getting your definition of it. As you're writing these books and you're talking about depression, you're talking about anxiety, do they all feed into addiction? I think you'd write a great book on addiction based on all these things that you've
Well,
already
that's one of the things we're talking about, the Fix Your Addiction Handbook. Um, it's interesting, uh, how when I started counseling addicts, how it changed my life. Because that program, that 12-step program is, we like to call it a program for addicts. It isn't. It's a program for life. If
Mhm.
you really look deep into a 12-step program, it's all the keys you need to live a happy life. So yeah, and I have some of that information. I allude back and forth to that concept in the books. The Fix Your Anxiety Handbook has a little bit of people, places, and things. The Depression book has a chapter on that also. So I never really get away from all. That's why I say you have all these reference points, and
Mhm.
if I'm writing, I get there and I say, well, I'm going to put this out. Ah, but there's that people, places, and things concept again. So I never fully get away from it.
Do you think I get asked a lot because I don't drink anymore. I'm coming up on 5 years, and people often ask me, "Oh, were you addicted, or were you, to alcohol, or did you were you an alcoholic, or did you go through Alcohol Anonymous, or these various um, programs?" And I often get asked, like, what is addiction? Because people are, they could be addicted to anything, really. And I feel like potentially, and correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of the things that you touch on in your books actually lead to the addiction portion of it. So if you got high anxiety, obviously, and you drink a lot, potentially one is helping the other. Do you have a definition of addiction?
Addiction to me is, I always talk about quick fixes, getting happy quickly. But so we use it to get happy quickly. A lot of people will tell you about using it for stress and using it for fun. It is uh, genetically, people are predisposed. That's what we've found. Goes back 30 years. So it is, to me, I don't want to say the medical model, but it is a genetic predisposition to certain substances, certain ways of living. Some people will become addicted. Here's the guy that takes up fishing, and he gets a fishing pole and a net and something to put his fish in, and he goes and has a good time every now and then. The next guy does the same thing, but he's got 12 poles, and he's got, a garage full of gear because he can't stop acquiring.
Hmm.
So it's really an intellectual, emotional predisposition to not be able to stop doing something, not be able to turn that off.
And if you do the work on the others, potentially it'll help.
Yeah, it's one of those things you attack as much as you can. But the key
Hmm.
is you get up every day and take care of business. That's really all it is. Now,
Yeah.
I got the information. I'm going to make these decisions. Sometimes I'm going to be comfortable with it. Sometimes it's going to make me uncomfortable, but I want to make the right decisions. And eventually it all just falls together.
Well, I appreciate the time today. We could talk for hours about many, many things, but you generally get paid for these sessions, so I'll keep it to no, I'll keep it to just the facts so we can promote the stuff. Where can people find you online, and when do we expect the release of the book?
You can find me online on my website, my name, faustruggiero.com. Everything about me, the books and everything is there. There's a contact link. If anyone wants to contact me, I do get back to people. And the two books are out, and the third book should be out. The Fix Your Depression Handbook should be out by the end of the year.
Fix It with Faust, is that a thing still?
Fix It with Faust is a radio show I do.
That's great. Do you have a podcast too that you do? You ever thought about doing
I
something that
have
would turn
one, and
into
I
it?
get to it. It's just me, though.
Yeah.
And I think I've done about 35 episodes. So I'll get back to that now that the writing is stopped, and I'll try to get one out every couple weeks or so.
Well, hopefully you'll come back down the road. There's lots I'd love to talk about, especially as we get topical and things start I don't know, maybe potentially getting back on its axes or getting further away from its axes. I think having these conversations are important for everybody to listen to that might be struggling. Highly recommend that you check out Faust and the Fix Yourself Handbook, the Fix Your Anxiety Handbook, and soon the Fix Your Depression Handbook on the way. I really appreciate the time, sir, and for stopping by today on Do.Did.Will, the Story of People podcast.
It has been a pleasure. Thank you.
All the best with the new book. I can't wait to read it. That is Do.Did.Will, the Story of People podcast this week on the Crier Media Network. Again, check out Faust and all of the things he's doing. Check out his podcast. Hopefully, you guys are feeling great after listening to this today. I thought you were extremely insightful. And remember, if you're into just conclusions, maybe try to get some answers. Try to get some more information. I like that advice. Thanks, buddy.
Thanks.